Welcome to Mulready Minutes with Oklahoma Insurance Commissioner Glenn Mulready. This is a podcast about insurance for insurance folks, risk managers, and business leaders. We'll dive deep and look at what is and isn't working, talk to leaders in the industry, and keep you informed on what's happening in Oklahoma and around the country.
Hi, welcome to another Mulready Minute. We're excited with our guest here today, a special person, a friend of mine for many years, Denise Johnson. Denise is a leader in the insurance world, both just in Oklahoma and nationally, has really taken her place as a strong female leader, but leader overall across the country and within Oklahoma. So we're thrilled to have Denise.
Not just Women's History Month. I get to
Overall.
work like 11 other months.
That's good.
Yeah.
With that, we're going to kick it off. I will read Denise's bio so I get that straight. We just have a short bio here, but Denise is an Oklahoma native and University of Central Oklahoma grad, president and CEO of Big I, Oklahoma. Prior to her time at Big I, Oklahoma, she was vice president at ECI Agency. Denise made history as the first woman chairman of the executive board of directors for the Independent Insurance Agents of Oklahoma, representing the state nationally. She's a passionate advocate who was a finalist for the IBA Woman of Distinction Award in 2017 and was included in the Hot 100 list in 2018. Beyond her career, Denise is active in her church, loves reading and traveling, and is a breast cancer survivor. She lives with her husband in Yukon. Really thrilled to have you with us, Denise. You bring so much to the table, and congratulations on your accomplishments we've just read about.
What does that Hot 100 list in insurance even mean?
I don't know if you saw me start to chuckle. I bit my tongue and moved on.
I know. No. I was trying to keep a straight face. I don't even know what that means, but it was a list of 100. But...
I know. I might mention, as I read that, I thought some folks may not know, Big I, what is Big I? But later we read the Independent Insurance Agents of Oklahoma became the Big I, known as the Big I. A lot of us, I know, informally knew it that way back when, but that's that Independent Insurance Agent. So you are responsible. You oversee the organization. Tell us about the organization.
Well, the organization started in 1907, so it's statehood, which was really exciting. And so it was really put together for independent agents. So that's agents that represent more than one company. So we're not a direct writer. My members, we have 377 member agencies across the state of Oklahoma. And my agents probably write about 80% of the commercial insurance across the state. They have a variety of agents, a variety of companies they can work with. It's interesting because, with an independent agent, I like to say that whenever someone walks into an independent agent and they need insurance, no one has to say, they either say yes or no, but they can always say yes because there's so many companies. We can figure out how to write it. You may not always be the price you like, but, varying coverages and all that. So independent agents have a broad scope of what they can write, very involved in the insurance industry. I really, my dad started in 1964, so I was around the insurance industry for a really long time. It is funny because he'd be like, have you ever thought of insurance? And I was like, no. And, my brother was always going to be in the insurance business. Well, I ended up joining the agency first, and then my brother came in. So we got to have a true family agency, which that's a lot of our membership are small businesses. About 70% of our members are 5 employees or less.
Yeah, a lot of family agencies.
Lots of family agencies. Mergers and acquisitions are a little bit interesting right now, but, we're still a really good hometown agent. So...
Yeah, what are you seeing with mergers and acquisitions? I know that can tend to ebb and flow, and what's happening now in the world?
It's still happening. So lots of mergers and acquisitions. There were a lot of outside entities that were coming in and buying out, but now what we're seeing are a lot of the larger entities. So maybe some bigger organizations, bigger agencies are coming in and they're collaborating. The other side of that I think is really interesting because I had predicted 5 years ago, I was like, I don't know, I may end up with 5 members in the end. And my membership actually hasn't dropped. Now, the size has, because a lot of people that whenever their agencies get merged in with another large organization.
A large national.
Yeah. You might have a producer or CSR that says, you know what, this isn't for me. They go and start their own scratch agency, which I think is an interesting little side gig that suddenly we're starting to see the growth of small business again. And they're able to get contracts. They're starting to grow their business in their small towns. And so far, it's been really successful. So where I thought my membership would like start deteriorating, it's not.
Yeah, and so many folks, I'm sure, listening, watching, understand that. But larger national, lots of players, lots of volume. It's not difficult to get contracts with ABC Insurance Company. You might have a dozen insurance companies or more lined up that you can do business with. Now, when, as you just described, someone breaks out on their own, they don't have that volume. They don't have that. What's that been like? Tell me about that.
So I think that's interesting. And as we all know, if there's a hole in the market, someone fills it. They figured out how to fit. So the trend has been a lot of what I call cluster groups or alliance groups. So a lot of these smaller agencies. So my dad started in 1964, small little bitty insurance agent. And my dad used to say, he still says, he goes, well, we like to be independent. We just like to be on our own. Well, it's really hard to do that anymore. So now what we're seeing is a lot of those small agencies will collaborate together, and they might have their own alliance group they use for maybe contingency purpose or market purposes and things like that. So suddenly if a group of 10 agents can come together, they can go to a large company and say, we'd like a contract, together. And then they grow with their own volume, but they all have goals that they can set. So it has, again, when you have a hole in the market, someone figures out how to fill it up.
Yeah.
So it has not been detrimental. I think it's actually been good.
They have gathered informally but formally in order to add leverage to that and volume. Yeah. Got it. Okay. Now, generally, the insurance industry, not agencies now, just what's happening out there in the marketplace. Well, 2025, we're about to almost ending the first quarter. What's happening in the insurance world?
I mean, have you heard there's a hard market in the property?
I hadn't heard that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. It's interesting because we have a hard market. I think we're going to have to live with it just a little bit more. So again, first quarter of 2025. What I'm hearing, like in the industry, is we probably still have about another year. If knock on wood, I don't even know if we have any wood here, but knock on wood, we have to get through the storm season. So that's going to help. And I'm starting to see rates kind of adjust just a little bit. So it's not the trajectory of growth of premiums that we're seeing, but it's still high. Here's what I'll say, and I'll give you credit for this, is that so many other states, they try to cap premiums. They try to cap what the companies can do. And so what you see are companies leave the state. We're seeing it in a lot of states, a lot of disasters going on. In our state, we don't have companies that are exiting our state. Now, we still have a competitive market. Are the prices what we like? Probably not. They're higher. I had to pay higher for my own homeowners and auto that I just renewed than I really wanted to pay, but I paid it. And so what we're seeing is that we don't have companies that are exiting our state. So we still have a competitive market. So sometimes people don't realize that, I've had reporters that have called me and they're like, aren't you upset with your commissioner because he didn't take control of that? And I go, no, we support that because we really still want a competitive market because we know once it hits a tipping point, then those markets are all still in our state. We still will continue with a competitive market. Yeah,
you're singing my song that I continue to talk about, that we let the market work here.
We do.
And therefore, we don't have companies leaving the state. I said we don't have an accessibility issue.
No.
We can argue we have an affordability issue, but we don't have an accessibility issue.
The other side of that, which I think is interesting right now, so we have the hardest market I think I have ever seen in my career in property, maybe a little bit of liability, but a lot of property, whether it be commercial or personal. A lot of times we hear it from the personal side, but it's happening on a really big scale on the commercial side too. My concern is that we look at, but it's interesting on commercial side, we have a lot of that growth of property, but business people that own property also understand how to spread their risk out. They understand they're going to have a higher deductible. They understand how they're going to budget out their businesses. So
basic risk management.
Yeah. So they understand it. So we probably don't hear a lot of the complaints on homeowners. People have limited income, so that's why it's hard.
Yeah.
But on the property side, you have a hard market. Then we have the other side. We have the softest market I've ever seen in workers' comp. Yeah. I keep going. I asked, I was talking to an NCCI person the other day, and I said, y'all, how low can it go?
That's my conversation each year. I ask them, okay, where's the bottom?
Right, yeah. Like we passed an incredible law back in, was it 2014, that we went to an administrative system, workers' comp, and it has been so great for Oklahoma businesses. I'm thrilled. We've watched it work with the administrative system. It's been great. But holy cow, rates are very, very low. So it's interesting. Now you start seeing the packages of commercial policies is that they'll go ahead and use that workers' comp to roll into their property to offset that. So it's a balance, but it's a really soft market, which is in some ways just as hard as a really hard market. They're just different.
Yeah. Yeah. We continue to see roughly about 10% drop each year. in those
Right.
loss costs. And
Right.
comp.
Like
Yeah.
I'm a little bit stunned by it.
Let me stick for a minute with homeowners because that touches
Okay.
so many people in our state.
Yeah.
And I've handled a lot of media interviews and lots of conversation about homeowners.
Yeah.
Just out speaking publicly. We have competition. I recently checked, and we have 113 companies
Okay.
with an active homeowners policy. Now, you and I know
Right.
113 companies are not writing new business,
Right.
but that number is maybe slightly less than half of that. But we have those companies with the rates that go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure we get to because some folks are struggling with that,
Mm-hmm.
and they ask me often about why don't we have a fair plan? Why don't we have a state plan? And I go back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I say, because we don't have an accessibility issue. When you have states like California or
Mm-hmm.
Florida and the coast and Louisiana on the coast, they had areas of their state where no insurance companies will write business.
Right.
We don't have that.
Mm-mm.
But then we get asked about, well, what if someone can't find coverage? And we do have a program that has worked very effectively, very free market,
Yeah.
I think. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the MAP program that you guys help administer.
So so in our association, we manage 7 different corporations. And 2 of those we manage the Oklahoma Auto Plan and the OK MAP program, which is the residual market for homeowners. Now, I think it's interesting because that's what I use to look at how the market is. So we understand the hard market. And so we kind of ramped up a little bit on staff going, okay, get ready because we're going to have to be placing this. The OK MAP program is actually very interesting, a little bit different from the FAIR program, but very interesting. It was established in the mid 80s. And whenever that program first started, it was a group of insurance agents and companies that came together and said, okay, let us all, feed into it with an assessment. And then all the companies agreed that they would take different risks. And so there's a magic computer program that says, okay, it's your turn according to the volume in what they're doing in the state at the time. And so as we watched that, whenever I first took over or when I served on the board of directors for the Big I, there were hundreds of policies in the OK MAP program. And so, in fact, there were 2 full-time people that had to run it. Currently, then, over the last 10 years, we've actually seen that decrease, which is actually a sign of a healthy market.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, I hope we can work our way out of a job. That program's always going to be there, but it's very little. So this past year, I was like, okay, let's get ready. Let's see what we need to do to ramp it up. And what we saw was an increase in questions. So here's what you have to do to qualify for the OK MAP program is you have to have been declined by your own insurance company, and then you have to have 2 more declinations from 2 more companies before you even qualify for it. Now, it is not a competitive program. You don't get to say like, oh, I'm going to go check and see what I can get through the OK MAP program. It has to be a declination.
The last resort.
It's a last resort. Mm-hmm. And then it goes to the companies and they look at, all the companies look at the at what the risk is. And so it may go, some companies may pass on it. This isn't fit our appetite. They'll go to the, but eventually they come together and say, okay, I'm going to take it. So I thought we would be, so our placement is not that we're writing it, it's placement in other companies. So last year I was really concerned. And so we just ramped up because we usually don't get, up until about 3 years, we were getting maybe, no joke, 10 to 12 calls a year. That's how healthy our market is. Again, that's good. And so last year, within the first 6 months of last year, we had like 40 inquiries. And a lot of it was, oh, wait, no, I just wanted to check the price. Oh, I didn't like the price. Oh, I did. No, you can't even be part of this program. And then once you get a price, it's what you get. So anyway, I ran the numbers yesterday just for fun. And so in the past 3 months, we've had 16 inquiries and we've placed 1, which tells you how the market is.
Yeah.
I always think that's a really
Even
good...
still.
Yes, yes. And so again, it's not competitive. We're probably just up with a lot of people that don't understand what it is, but it is a last resort. It is there. It does work. We've watched it work over and over. And then it's placed with what I call a real life company. And so that way they have a chance at renewal. It doesn't bounce out of the program. If they have a good year, then it just stays with that company. They can offer renewal. They can go back into the market. So we're thrilled with it. Oklahoma developed a really good program when they developed it.
Yeah, it has worked. And, when I've talked about it, it is not a true fair plan. It's not a
No.
insurer of last resort, but it is I call it sort of a free market solution to
Yeah.
that problem. Folks having trouble getting coverage, homeowners insurance. What do I do? I've got a mortgage. I need coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an option, and it works. We need pictures of all sides of the house. We need a long application completed, but it then will be assigned to someone, and I know they can pass on it, and then but eventually someone has to write that, and we are placing coverage. So it's good to hear that is still not. The reason I mentioned to talk about this was my gut was telling me that would be up quite a bit too, but good to hear that it's still healthy.
No, it's actually.
I mainly just want to make sure folks know that we have that. We've got that. Question answered. What does someone do if they can't get coverage?
The other thing I like about it, it's actually a pretty easy process. It's not overnight. You don't suddenly get a quote because a company gets to take it. They get to look at it for 2 weeks, and if they don't want it, it has it. So it could take 4 to 6 weeks. So in this day and age that we push buttons and get to have coverage really quick, it doesn't do that. But they really are looking at it because obviously there's some risk involved because a lot of times it's, they've had high claims. Maybe their home hasn't been updated, whatever that needs to be. So it is a little bit of a process, so it can't happen overnight. So that's probably the only frustration with it. But the companies all agreed that they wanted to have the full amount of time that they needed to underwrite any of those risks that would come up.
Yeah. So it's easy for me to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the regulatory world.
Yeah.
I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the marketplace and with agents. Tell me what's happening with the commercial marketplace. What are you hearing from your agents? What's the pulse there?
Commercial marketplace is very similar to what we talked about even with homeowners, is that property coverages are very difficult. Companies probably have tightened up their underwriting
guidelines.
Yeah. But they're still writing, so they're very specific on risk. It's probably a little bit harder. There used to be a day, so whenever I was back in my agency years ago, I might come into a large business that I was working on. I might be able to give them a competitive look at, 3 to 4 different companies with varying this. If you get to walk in with one and here's what it is with the coverage that they need, then we consider that pretty good. So the appetites have probably tightened up a little bit. But again, I think we're in a hard market. So I think we may ride that out for a little bit. But I think that'll settle in after a little bit.
Yeah, when I get asked, my response is often, well, your difficulty in getting property insurance here in Oklahoma right now is really pretty relative to how many square footage of roof do you have?
Right? It's really true.
If you've got a lot of roof space,
you're
going to have some trouble there.
Yeah.
Okay. Denise, you've been, I mentioned early when we first came on here and started about your leadership role, and especially with women. You have been a great advocate for women leadership. So thank you for that from Oklahoma.
Right.
And I know you just had very recently a conference. Tell us about what you've been doing in that space, and maybe talk a little bit about the conference last week.
Yeah, it was, I don't even know what day this is. It was just last week. It was phenomenal. First, we did a women's conference. We developed it. Actually, this was our second year to do it, and we call it Empower Her. And what we're finding out in the insurance field, and I'm starting to see this grow, is there was a day that about out of the insurance industry, you had maybe, just a small percentage, probably less than 10% of women that even owned agencies, but they were still 80 to 90% of the workforce. And so now we feel like we wanted to develop women and say, okay, you can own that agency. Here's what business ownerships can do for you. And it's such a great business for women. I'll tell you how we kind of started. So we have a couple of things that we have going on. Our conference last week, I will say, we started out the first year and we had 68 attendees, which we thought was great. But I had a lot of pushback like, well, how can we let everybody out of the office all at the same time? Uh-huh. And so this year we did put a lot of pressure, like empower the women that are in your office. We encouraged a lot of the agency owners, like send them, take a table, let them have a day, because we want to empower them. We want to encourage them. We want to show them what purpose is. And frankly, that's my heart. I want to walk away to where they're as strong as they've ever been before. And in an insurance industry, look, it's very male dominated. I love them all. I was the first female chairman of this organization. It took 103 years for them to get there.
Yeah.
and I do laugh. The first time I ever walked into an executive committee of the Big I, they all stood up. And I was like, what? And they were so respectful and so nice. It was something completely different for them. And then as we've just grown, then it's become very normal. We have probably about half of our board that's female now. It's interesting. So we actually started a consulting program that really emphasized women in the insurance industry, because I don't think there's been a great focus on that. And it really started out kind of simple, is that I was just trying to get women to serve on my board of directors. Uh-huh. And I would call them and I'd be like, hey, we have this position open. We'd be interested. The committee would call and they're like, I don't know if I know enough. The whole, I don't know if I know enough. And it's like, I don't know. You just walk in and you fake it till you figure it out. And so we actually started a mastermind program. We're in our 10-year anniversary of that. And it started out with local women that were kind of in, maybe not in a C-suite, but on a little bit of an upper level, like how do we best get women to serve on our board, on our committees? What do they need to do? And we just started a little local mastermind program that talked about leadership in the industry and leadership overall. And we now have, we call them tables. So we have 8 to 10 women that are usually on those. Those are now all the way across the United States. We have about 12 of those tables that we have. They're all mastermind programs. Some of them are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And so we're very excited. So really the Empower Conference started out as kind of an extension of that. How do we best reach, if they can't commit to, a monthly meeting, but what can they do for one day and see the importance of what they do in the industry? And we have incredible women in the industry that have probably changed the trajectory, and we just don't know it. Mm-hmm. So I was super excited. I could probably talk about that forever and
Looked
ever.
Like you had a good crowd. I saw some pictures.
Such a good crowd. We packed, the problem we have is we packed out the room. I don't know what we're going to do next year. We sold it out. Yeah. And so ran out of food in the breakfast, but all the good stuff that happens.
Bigger space.
I know that's exactly what's going to happen. We were thrilled. We were so happy with it. So very excited about it.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up here, Denise, thank you for being with us. Big I, looking ahead, we've talked about agencies, M&A. Anything else that you see on the horizon, sort of navigating the independent insurance agent world and looking ahead 5 years? Years.
I always like to look down 5 years, and it's interesting because sometimes I wish like everyone would just sit quiet and let's just continue to do what we're doing. But tomorrow could change all over again. So what I look at over the next 5 years, I do think M&As will continue. I do think small agencies will continue. I think what we're going to see are a lot more of the alliance groups that are going to grow, because I think we have to have collaboration. I think the key to us being successful is all of us communicating. Like, we have a great relationship with the Oklahoma Insurance Department, with the legislature. And so how do we continue to, because insurance is hard to explain and understand. So we have to be a voice in this industry, in this space, to make it better. Because I always say it's not just about our association, but how do we make insurance better for our state, for the consumer, and for all of those around us. And so it takes us that we're all working together. So commend you for making that happen too.
Well, and I always say at our department that our top priority is consumer protection, but a big part of consumer protection is consumer education. And so thank you for partnering with us on just educating consumers about what we do and how to protect their property, their life, their financial well-being. So Denise, thank you so much for being with us. We sure appreciate you and what you do. Glad you've been on our most recent Mulready Minute podcast.
I'm so excited.
Okay. Well, that wraps up this edition of the Mulready Minute podcast with Denise Johnson, CEO of the Big I, Oklahoma, and woman leader extraordinaire. So thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.
If you found this episode informative, please subscribe and share with your colleagues. Visit oid.ok.gov/podcast. Let us know what topics you would like to hear about on this podcast. Until next time, take care from the Oklahoma Insurance Department.